One of my favorite parts of Pride and Prejudice is how each character feels so unique. Even those who share personality traits have one defining mark that makes them individual. Static characters are easy to label and put neatly in a box, but for dynamic characters, it can be harder to pinpoint an exact designation. When does curiosity become nosiness? When does honesty become a lack of empathy? Or conversely, we see some characters grow from jealous to faithful or brash to courageous. In this video essay, I will be assigning a zodiac sign to each Pride and Prejudice character because even as characters undergo growth, their base personality traits still shine through. Quick disclaimer, the examples will all be from section 1, but there may be some movie clips from later because the movie follows a looser timeline.
What?
Let's begin. To start the video, I believe it is important to look at who raised the Bennet sisters. First we have Mrs. Bennet. Mrs. Bennet is pretty static throughout section 1. She is chatty and gossipy and always puts her daughters first, especially when it comes to marriage. Mrs. Bennet is a Gemini. Gemini are typically outgoing and talkative, but can be a bit nosy when it comes to the latest tea.
Oh, yes. We fully expect a most advantageous marriage.
Gemini can also be stereotyped as impulsive and flighty, and harshest of all, two-faced.
It is a pity she's not more handsome.
Mama?
Oh, but Lizzie will never admit that she's plain.
Poor Charlotte. Next we have Mr. Bennet. Mr. Bennet is first introduced teasing his wife and getting on the nerves of her and their daughters. But as time goes on, we see how much he cares for his family, particularly Elizabeth. Mr. Bennet is a Sagittarius. He is humorous and playful, and as we see him poking fun at his wife...
Oh, Mr. Bennet, how can you tease me so? Have you no compassion for my poor nerves?
Oh, you mistake me, my dear. I have the highest respect for them. They've been my constant companions these 20 years.
Papa!
But can also be too honest. He is intelligent and tends to be independent, unable to stand his slightly overbearing wife for long periods of time. He obviously values freedom, not just for himself, but for his daughters to make their own choices.
Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do.
Mr. Bennet! Thank you, Papa.
Which brings us to the oldest Bennet sister, Jane. Jane is the peacemaker and sees the good in people, and values balance, much like the scales of a Libra. Libras are known for their diplomacy, and Jane is the diplomat of the family, placating their mother by ending up with a good-mannered, wealthy man. Libras are also very compatible with other air signs, such as Mr. Bingley's Aquarius. Jane and Charles share the idealistic outlook typical for air signs, and as time goes on, Mr. Bingley shows the devotion of an Aquarius towards Jane. Aquariuses are progressive and independent, such as Mr. Bingley ignoring Caroline's snarky comments towards the Bennets.
Charles, you cannot be serious.
The final thing Jane and Charles share is a combined love for all things beautiful.
You are dancing with the only handsome girl in the room.
She is the most beautiful creature I have ever beheld.
I am going to skip the second eldest sister for now and come back to her, so up next we have the middle child, Mary Bennet. Mary is a static, minor character with the major personality of a Pisces. She is closed off and moody until her feelings are hurt, and then she becomes overly sensitive and incredibly emotional.
I've been practicing it all week.
She's also very artistic, often seen playing the piano. Next are the two inseparable youngest sisters, Lydia and Kitty. Lydia takes after her mother and hence is the favorite, obsessed with finding a husband. She is a Leo, a fan of drama and attention, and she can also be somewhat vain and manipulative. She is the leader of the two. Kitty is a Cancer, loyal to Lydia and finding security in her and their escapades. She often finishes Lydia's sentences.
Oh, Mr. Wickham, how perfect you are.
I picked up my handkerchief too. Did you drop yours on purpose, Lizzie?
Mr. Wickham's a lieutenant.
Charlotte Lucas may as well be a Bennet sister with how much she hangs around them. She is the perfect example of a Taurus. Tauruses are some of the most reliable and steady people you will ever meet, and Charlotte is always there when Elizabeth needs her.
There are few of us who are secure enough to be really in love without proper encouragement.
Tauruses are also grounded in reality and practical, and we see this in full force when Charlotte agrees to marry the rather unlikable Mr. Collins in pursuit of a more comfortable future.
We are all fools in love.
Oh, for heaven's sake, Lizzie, don't look at me like that. There is no earthly reason why I shouldn't be as happy with him as any other.
But he's ridiculous.
Oh, hush. Not all of us can afford to be romantic. I've been offered a comfortable home and protection. There's a lot to be thankful for.
On to someone who could not be farther from Charlotte's situation. Caroline Bingley is set for life. She is detailed and methodical, all the traits of a Virgo. She may consider herself patient,
For heaven's sake, are we to receive every Bennet in the country?
but can also show the negative traits of a Virgo in being critical, uptight, and picky, having something to say about everyone.
Apparently Lady Bathurst is redecorating her ballroom in the French style. A little unpatriotic, don't you think?
Caroline Bingley is a good example of a woman of the time obsessed with upholding status and being in the upper class's good graces. This also hints at another Virgo trait, overthinking, as she constantly stresses herself with these ideas no matter how hard she tries to play it cool. She is the product of the misogyny of the time.
Music, singing, drawing, dancing, and the modern languages to deserve the word. And something in her air and manner of walking.
I'll cut straight to the chase with this one. Mr. Wickham is a Capricorn. Now my ex is a Capricorn, so excuse my bias. Mr. Wickham is a fan of clever banter, as we see from the beginning.
Dear, oh dear, you must be the shame of the regiment.
What laughingstock?
What do your superiors do with you?
Ignore me. I'm of next to no importance, so it's easily done.
Capricorns are very unforgiving and be rather cold as well.
Well, he loved me better, and Darcy couldn't stand it.
They are money-motivated and ambitious, traits we periodically see pop up in Mr. Wickham. This is the moment we've been waiting for, the pride and prejudice of the story, Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth. Mr. Darcy is a Scorpio. From when we first meet him, he is rather egotistical and serious. His hubris is his pride. His intensity is not taken well by the equally stubborn Elizabeth, who he insults almost immediately.
But her sister Elizabeth is very agreeable.
Perfectly tolerable, I dare say. Not handsome enough to tempt me.
Elizabeth is an Aries, headstrong and stubborn in her prejudices. They clash immediately.
And of course she must improve her mind by extensive reading.
Elizabeth refuses to think before she speaks.
So what do you recommend to encourage affection?
Dancing. Even if one's partner is barely tolerable.
And Mr. Darcy becomes easily jealous seeing her with Mr. Wickham. Elizabeth jumps to conclusions and assumptions.
How cruel.
Mr. Darcy is secretive over his letters.
And what do you do so secretly, sir?
Their development is a welcome sight. Elizabeth's fiery passion to match her fire sign and Mr. Darcy's jealousy melt into a sort of unspoken loyalty between the two, Elizabeth accepting a dance even when she's unhappy with him.
May I have the next dance, Miss Elizabeth?
May. Did I just agree to dance with Mr. Darcy?
I dare say you'll find him very amiable, Lizzie.
It would be most inconvenient since I've sworn to loathe him for all eternity.
Elizabeth's brash nature slowly turns more towards enthusiasm. Mr. Darcy's stubborn nature becomes more of a faithfulness or devotion. Scorpio and Aries are two compatible signs, and I'm excited to see how they interact further in Section 2. But you didn't think I could stop there, did you? No. Mr. Collins is an officious, because officious doesn't exist, much like Mr. Collins' personality.
What a superbly featured room, and what excellent boiled potatoes. Many years since I've had such an exemplary vegetable.